to shut your mind up. Everybody's having one.
Yes. I need to feel some emotions. I'm a bit off my game this morning. I forgot so many things. So I'm writing myself a note about what I need to tell you before I tell you.
No,
yeah. Is it in that bag?
Oh, it's just a bit wobbly. Just trying to stop it from creaking in my microphone. It's actually coming through my eye.
Who's first time in Dameron?
First time in
Who isn't first time in Dameron? Two people. Yeah.
First time in Denver.
Yeah.
Who's first time to one of our events?
Yeah, who's first time to one of the events?
Welcome.
Yeah, welcome. Lovely to meet you.
My volume, if I was still. It's not clear what I'm saying. This hall has a lot of echo, unfortunately.
Yeah. You can hear it clear. Yeah.
We tried to change it a bit yesterday, but couldn't really get better than we've got it right now.
You get excited, so
I'll get excited and it'll get started. Yeah, that's the whole reason.
there's a lot of echo in here because of the ceiling and the hard surfaces. Oh, have you finished? Have you finished? Sorry, I was going to ask you to talk to Elsa, but then I saw Elsa. Have you finished? Did you check everyone off the list?
Yeah. There was about 20 odd people that haven't arrived yet. There was 60 people who arrived and
Yeah. If you could just stay ladies out until we're about to start, because I like to know that everyone's arrived or how many are still missing. Do you want to do
I don't know if I can do much with my sound, but aside from take up the highs, but
Maybe high frequencies would help.
bit of high frequency would help.
Yeah, just more.
Yeah, the problem is it also produces ringing in the auditorium above that, so it's probably going to have to stay like it is, unfortunately. Testing 1, 2, 3. Testing 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
Perhaps everyone will be silent. It's okay.
See how we go.
Yeah, let's see how.
Yeah. Well, I can hear myself okay, but I don't know how we go when I get next to Mary.
Yeah. No, we're all right.
You're okay?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Welcome, everyone. Lovely morning, isn't it? Nice to have you all. Yeah. Good day to talk about God's truth. I just have a few announcements before we start. Obviously, this is the village hall, and we're in the middle of the village. The manager of the hall just said if you could be respectful with the noise, so not to. I don't know. Going on this morning, I don't think you're all going to be very rowdy in the lunch break, but maybe don't play rugby and have loud calls to each other. Yeah. We have the full use of the hall, so we will break a few times during the day, but we'll have one. So the short breaks for toilets, we'll have one longer break for lunch break, and we can use, there's a little room you might have seen directly opposite the foyer. And then we've got the whole yard out there, which leads onto a little stream as well, so feel free to make use of that space during the lunchtime. Yeah, it's nice to be around some nature. Like I said, I'm having a funny morning. I forgot the donation box, so it will be here tomorrow, but if you would like to make a donation, hopefully you're still here by tomorrow and you can do it. The main thing that, what do we need to talk about? Yeah. The toilets, you might have seen the toilets, they're just on the right and left as you come in through the main door. If you could leave the children's change room and disabled toilet for Jesus and I to use, unless you have a genuine need for that toilet, it just, in each break, it makes it easier for us in case we have to attend to any other things to not have to queue with everyone. Yeah. All right. We'll talk about microphones.
Just with the toilets too, just be aware there are dryers in the toilets, but if you use them during our session, then we end up hearing them in here. So what we would like is if you can either avoid using them altogether, but if you can't, then make sure both doors entry into the toilets are closed. So it just buffers the noise curve so that people here don't have to hear you drying your hands during the session.
That's right. So
And also, remember that we share all of our audios around the world. They're also going to hear your hands drying during the session. They're going to go, who was that unloving person?
Yeah. So obviously you're free to use the loos at any time during the session, but just be aware of the hand drying noise. In the breaks, obviously go ahead and use them because we're not, that won't end up in the end recording. So we are recording the audio, Jesus and I today. Some other folks are doing video recordings. Has everyone seen the video recordings that have gone up so far from others who've recorded around the world? Yeah. There's I think they're all up until now. So far we've
Not on our website though.
Not on our website, but just on YouTube, and I did put it on mary.divinetruth.com. I did put a link to where you can view them as well, so if you'd like to, or hear the audios. Yeah. So we should bring our love to you guys, but also the love from all the people that we've visited so far, all around the world. Many of them send you their love, as well as people from Australia as well. So, many people in Australia were quite excited for everyone to hear some divine truth in person, and so I'm sending you their greetings on their behalf. Yeah.
And actually, the people in Australia paid for 1/3 of our trip. So I think we should thank them, shouldn't we?
Yeah.
And can we also make a special thanks to Amy, who
Amy
would have helped you with the parking. Thank you so much, Amy. She helped me immensely in finding venues in the south of England. We went through quite a few, didn't we? But Amy was really good at communicating with me about all of the venue features, she sent me these lovely descriptions that made it very easy for us to communicate about what would be suitable and so on. So, and spend a lot of time speaking to local people in all these little regions around here. So thank you, Anne.
Everywhere Mary and I go, we have to organise venues, and it's sometimes very tricky. So in some cases, we've gone through 100 different venues before we find a venue that's suitable. And oftentimes we find a venue that's suitable and then they don't want us there. So it sort of gets a bit tricky finding venues, and so, you know, having a person on the ground helping us is often very helpful.
Yeah, much appreciated. And we also need to thank some local people here who've helped us to set up the venue yesterday, put up chairs, set up all the sound equipment. So thank you guys. That's Tim and Bex, Anna.
Put up your hands, guys.
Just put up your hands.
All the guys
Nigel,
who were here yesterday, thank you.
Amy, Emma, and Elsa.
And it's also just so was that. Then it was
about the post of the speakers.
Ah, yes, that's what I wanted to mention.
Yeah, see, we're having a funny morning, aren't we?
Oh,
Yeah. So those guys, a lot of those guys actually pulled together to purchase the speakers that you see around the hall.
And the microphone and the stands, and our stands for our RF antennas as well.
Yeah.
Are all purchased by that group of people. And without that, we would normally have to hire them, and hiring them in England is fairly difficult. We probably have to do it from London. And so, yeah, having this available, we had it last week as well when we were up at Linton in the north. And also one of them is coming to Ireland with us, with the speakers as well. So they're also going to be used in Ireland. So by the time we're done, and it's these three, the speakers will have almost paid for themselves in terms of higher costs. So I'd like to thank again those people who have done that. What we're trying to do is set up a little posse in Europe where we have 4 speakers, one in England where we have 4 speakers, and we're also done the same in the United States as well with 4 speakers. And that means Mary and I don't have to travel with speakers, which is actually impossible for us to do really, because we're already travelling with all of our gear, which is all this other gear that we travel with, and we're pretty luggaged up when we're travelling. And so having somebody where we don't have to hire speakers when we go to a venue sort of helps us quite a lot actually, because we don't have to pick them up and drop them off and do all the organising of them, and every speaker is different, so you have to learn how to use every one of them as well. Having them all the same is very, very helpful as well. So yeah, it's really good that those people have done that for us.
Yeah, very good. All right, let's get this show on the road, as I always say. With the microphones today, we're going to ask you please to use microphones when you ask a question. Please feel free to ask a question at any moment. Jesus might not stop mid-flow, but we do love your engagement, and a lot of people who do engage find it really beneficial. And also the people who listen to the recording afterwards really I know many of them really appreciate your sincere questions. No question is silly. We will, if it's addictive or demanding, it'll be pointed out to you, and then you have more information about your emotions, don't you? So that's also a good thing. All right. To use the microphone, it's because everyone has a different voice and different voice level, we're just asking people to use a standard way of using the microphone, because some of you get quite excited and then you keep talking and moving the microphone around, or some of you eat the microphone, and so it becomes very funny on the recordings. So if you can please put the microphone on your chin and your chest when you speak, so like this. Yep. And whoever, Jesus or I might remind you if you're not doing it, I'll go.
We'll go chin and chest, chin and chest.
So I would like 2 volunteers who'd be happy to do the mic running bit. So maybe Chris and Mikey. Yeah, cool, thank you.
Now you may have to swap positions so you're on the outside.
Yes.
Of somebody, if you're a mic runner. Yeah. And that's good.
And then just choose how you're going to divide up the room. Sometimes people go, I'll take questions left, right. Yeah.
Left, right, or left, right sometimes.
Yeah. Now, just when you're the mic runner, please be careful not to bash the mic on other things. So if you touch it on your,
Or to tap it on your leg.
it's always turned on. We want it left on. Yeah.
And we always have it on, and we don't turn off the mute because we find that turn off the mute and then people
turn on the mute.
Turn on the mute, and then people forget that it's on and end up with lots of flow interruptions.
Yes.
So we prefer not to have that.
So if you can just be mindful of it,
Is it possible for me to ask a question?
Of course.
I've got the mic.
Yes.
Is that what you got?
That's now, from now on, it's just getting mic on mic all day.
I feel like I'm quite optimistic.
Okay, just before you do that, let's finish on the microphones, before we go into the content.
And also, I won't be taking that question until I've set the scene for what I want to talk about with you today.
Sure.
Yes.
There'll be time for it.
I'm just testing.
Is it?
Yeah, it's definitely on. So just be mindful when you're holding it, not to bash it on things. Please don't adjust anything on the bottom, like turn it off, turn it on mute. And please don't deliver the mic to a person until Jesus or I have indicated. So if you want to ask a question, please raise your hand, leave your hand up until Jesus or I indicate you, and then leave it up until the mic gets to you so they know where they're going.
So you just keep your hand up when we select you.
Yes, until you get the microphone delivered to you. Otherwise, the mic runners turn around and they don't know where they're going.
Yeah.
And also, mic runners, if you can leave the microphone with the person while Jesus or I are answering the question, and then take it back once that's finished. Yeah, because sometimes there's follow-up and discussion.
Yeah.
Lovely. All right.
Okay.
Anything else?
I think so.
We'll just add it in. If we've forgotten it, we'll just.
I just would like to ask you guys which countries you come from. So, how many of you are just from England? Yeah, so the majority. How many of you are not from England? Okay.
Yeah, and so we've got people from Lithuania, is that right? At the back? Poland. Lithuania. Sorry, Poland. Australia. Hello, Karen. Austria. Nicholas, you're from France, aren't you? Yeah, France, Nelly, Nicholas.
Romania.
Israel, is it? Yes. And where else? Johnny.
France.
I said France. Yeah.
That's it.
Oh.
Live in Portugal, yeah.
Julie, you're Swiss, aren't you?
Yeah.
United States. There you go, long trip.
Yeah.
And Nicholas was from
France.
France.
Yeah.
Who's from Romania?
Who's from Romania?
I'm from actually.
Yeah.
Okay, because I stopped somewhere.
Yeah. And who did we go to here, David? Netherlands, yeah.
Holland.
And Bulgaria, yeah. Where are you from? Yes, you. Yes. Yeah. Slovakia. Oh, cool.
There you go.
And Johnny, where are you from?
Sweden.
Yeah.
And Brian, is it at the back?
Ireland.
Cool.
And down here? Ireland.
Born in Poland, but from London.
Poland, but from London. Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah, good on.
All right. We're going to Ireland next week. We'll be in Ireland next week. Are you joining us there as well? Yeah, cool. All right.
Good on.
Lovely.
Thank you. I love you so much.
Yeah. And we always forget, but it's nice to do it also because in case you want to make connections with anyone else from your same country.
Yeah. Who's from Earth?
Yeah.
None of you are from Earth.
The flesh suit is from Earth.
The flesh suit from Earth. Yes. Not yes. You're all from somewhere else. We're all temporary alien residents on this planet. So look after the planet while you're here, right?
Yeah.
Okay. And while we've been travelling around, we've been sort of choosing different themes to get started with different groups of people. And for the last few weeks actually, at Portugal, we started on this theme of God's standard of life. So this is the theme we would like to continue with you this weekend. The basic things we would like to do is today and tomorrow, what we'll do today is just briefly raise sort of a theme with you, and then we can take any questions on that theme, if that makes sense. So any questions related to the subject that we raised, we would love to be able to answer. And tomorrow we will do much the same. And then, because Mary and I are feeling on Sunday, we're pretty tired. Mary and I, we've been travelling a lot already. We've had a lot of sleepless locations where there's been a lot of racket and noise around us. Even in the middle of the Alps, there was an excavator right by us, starting at 6:30 a.m. I think it was, or something like that. Then we were in Belgium. There were church bells ringing from 6 a.m. to 10 p.m. and jets going over, of course, all that time as well. And none of which Mary and I are very used to, because we lived in the bush in Australia and it's silent when we go to sleep at night, aside from animals and birds. But so it's sort of not, we really haven't caught up. There was a bakery next to us in Portugal, which started quite early in the morning and also went to quite late at night. And so everywhere we've gone, even here in Bournemouth, we're staying in Bournemouth here, and there's the air show on now. Which is so that's went till 9:30 or 10 o'clock last night or whatever else. And so normally Mary and I we go to bed about 8 o'clock and we wake up about 4 to 6 o'clock in the morning. But obviously our routine is very different since we've been travelling and we're a bit tired. So on Sunday, what we're thinking is, instead of me talking to you all day Sunday as well, we're thinking we would like to help some spirits on Sunday. So on Sunday morning, and we're thinking we will change Sunday morning's time, if we can, to 10 a.m. Does that affect anybody badly if we do that? We change that time to 10 a.m.? No? And if we change the time to 10 a.m. and then we'll just spend the time doing some mediumship is what we'd like to do on Sunday. Just to help some spirits that have been following us around for the last 6 or 7 weeks, just so that we can sort of help them progress. And rather than, Mary and I, normally we would do these things during the week, but we've got very little time during the week. We basically 3 days events, and then each week is 3-day events, and then we've got pack up and travel, and then unpack and get food and everything in our new place. So we lose 2 days there, and then we lose 1 day generally in set up. And so basically Mary and I are left with 1 day a week while we're travelling. So because it's been so busy, we get, and also we've had not a lot of sleep, we begin pretty tired, and so we want to just take it easy on this Sunday, because we feel we've got, after this we've got Ireland 3 days, and then we're transatlantic after that, so we're across to Canada. So we don't want to arrive to the rest of our journey. By the time we get to Ireland, we're halfway. But we don't want to arrive for the rest of our journey totally so tired that we need more rest, and we don't get time with them either. So what we want to do Sunday is the mediumship instead, and that will help me a bit with my tired, my voice. But it'll also help those spirits too, which is what we'd like to do.
And before we proceed, there's a lot of spirits here today already. It's quite busy, and obviously when you come, you bring all the spirits who hang out with you usually, and then there's spirits who
come on a tour with us.
Yeah, come on the tour with us. And there's
different classes of spirits that come on the tour with us. Some of them are our spirit friends who are still in the spirit world, in the celestial heavens, and they come to help. And then there's other ones who follow us around trying to sort of attack or harm you when you come to one of our groups. And then there's others that are just taking opportunities to learn about truth that they wouldn't normally have in the locations where they currently are in the spirit world. So
that's right, and some of them are attracted to what we're talking about. And one of the 14 who's passed already into the spirit world, John, he's a very dear friend of ours, and John and I are on a bit of a mission on this trip to work together to help a lot of spirits. And so often when you guys ask your questions, or the spirits around you, or sometimes your family members come, sometimes just spirits who've been attracted to you through various things that you are struggling with in your life or addictions that you have, they can often be helped in this environment. So John has a team of people working with him to try and help those people as they hear more truth, or they sort of feel different shifts in yourself as well. So I do want to acknowledge all the spirits here, and also for you guys, I think it's helpful to acknowledge that there's spirits around who are who can already feel that their spirit friends are quite excited that they're here. I know some of you can feel that. Some of you might have felt a bit of difficulty getting here or resistance getting here, or you might find it a bit hard to listen at certain times. And often that's because there's a spirit with you who's like, oh, don't make any changes in this direction. I want you to keep drinking coffee or having sexual projections at men or whatever the addiction you might have. And then also there's sort of spirits who just globally kind of want to oppose what Jesus and I are sharing, and sometimes they can give you a hard time as well. So prayer is really helpful. Calling on your spirit friends is also really helpful in those situations. And obviously feeling what you feel about what's happening, what's being presented, and also what you might be feeling around you as well, feeling how you feel about that. Yeah. It always goes better when we acknowledge our spirit friends and also the other influences. So.
Yeah, because remember, not all of them are your friends, right?
That's right.
All right, so the subject, this God standard of love we've been talking about for some time. If you look at the recordings that have been done, we'll give you some addresses where you can look at the recordings or listen to them as we go through this weekend. You'll see that we've covered many different subjects. Like in Belgium, we started talking about God's existence and the reality of God's existence, and also just generally started introducing concepts about law and other things like that. And then in Austria, we sort of continued that theme, but also we felt that there were a lot of people who want to rebel against the law. So we talked about fighting God's laws, the whole process that most people have of wanting to have a big barney with God about the way God's made the universe and the way God's made the human. So we talked to them about that a lot. And then in Portugal, we had some interesting experiences there. It was interesting because there were sort of two main groups of spirits influencing the group, and one group was very Buddhist, and they'd been influenced by these Buddhist groups of spirits. And the first group was very shut down, and Mary and I during the week had some chats with those Buddhist spirits, and some of them moved on, but some of them became quite angry. And so the second group of Portugal was really interesting because we had a mixture of different people there as well. And then there was a lot of sexual injuries in the group, which also played a part with what kind of spirits they were attracting as well. And so we had to deal with that as well. And so we started raising this issue of what is God's standard of love, and how do we enact principles in our life rather than worrying about our individual problems. Because what we notice a lot of people doing is they listen to divine truth for a bit, and then they start going, oh yeah, I can see, they start to understand they've got some addictions, and they start to understand they've got some personal issues. And a lot of people, when they first hear divine truth, is they start to feel like it's sort of like a personal assistance, like a personal development program, which it's not really, because it's a relationship with God program. So it's not a personal development program, it's a relationship with God program. But most people forget about the God part of it and in fact have very little to do with God, and instead focus on developing self, in terms of changing self. But of course, without a relationship with God, changing self is quite hard actually. And so that's why a lot of people who hear principles we teach are finding things much harder than it needs to be, because they are focused so much on the individual problems they face and trying to change their behaviour rather than changing their feelings, the feelings they have inside themselves towards things. And a lot of the world is very aimed towards you faking something, you making out a change has occurred so that you can feel better about yourself. So a lot of people in the world are very focused on that. So so we're noticing that the intellectual understanding of God's truth, most people are focused on, but there's very little soul-based understanding of God's truth. And this is what we would like to change. And one of the reasons why Mary and I chose to do this trip was because we could feel that that's what was happening all around the world. And we haven't been able, because of our time constraints, been able to share much with people for the last 5 years because we've been so busy in all of the pursuits we're doing at home. There's a backlog of like thousands of hours of recordings we have at home that haven't been shared. And we wanted to go, well, we don't want to sit down for the rest of our life editing video and sound and make that our goal. What we want to do is meet people and talk, honestly and truthfully with you about what's going on and in terms of progress and why that kind of progress, why progress is sometimes difficult. And we want to also raise issues with you that we can see involving your sin, because it's the awakening to sin that's going to also give you an awakening to your relationship with God. So what we did when we were in the north, in Linton, was we raised this issue of God's laws. And we said that God's laws are like drawing a line in the sand. That if you stay one side of the line, your life will be pleasant. If you stay the other side of the line, your life is going to be difficult. And the line is the law. So in other words, if you live in harmony with the law, so this side is harmony with the law, but let's call it another name that most people don't like to talk about: obedience. We obey the law, right? So when we obey the law, we are living in harmony with the law. Also, we are living in harmony with God's standard of love, because every law that God's created is a standard of love that God says, this is my standard. This is the standard of love that I have created. And so God created this standard of love, and if we live in harmony with it by obeying the law, and remember, the obedience to the law isn't just a thought and then an action. The obedience to the law begins as an emotion, a feeling that you have to obey, which is very different than going, oh God, I've got to obey another law. It's very different to that. It's more like I want to obey the law. I feel like it's important for me to obey the law. It's a good thing for me to obey the law. That coming from your heart to obey the law rather than just from your mind going, I know I have to obey the law, but I don't really want to, I don't really like that law. So obeying is a heartfelt desire really to obey. And in this side of living in harmony, of course, your life will be in harmony with love, because that every law is based upon love. Your life will also be in complete harmony with truth, and this is something we want to focus a bit of attention on this weekend, because what we see is a lot of people think that they can fake things in their life with partners, friends, everybody, and then still have a relationship with God and live in harmony with the law. But that's not possible. As soon as you're out of harmony with truth, you are out of harmony with the law. And so we want to talk about that a bit more. You also, in this place, there are rewards. You're rewarded for obeying the law. There are positive things that will happen in your life that not only to your life, but also to yourself. And you will come to feel happy and proud of yourself obeying the law. You'll have a better and stronger connection with your feelings if you obey the law. You'll have a stronger connection to humility and faith if you obey the law. You'll learn to develop your faith further by obeying the law. Because when you obey the law and you get rewarded, you go, oh, I got rewarded for obeying the law. Wow. You're like, the next time you're faced with obeying the law, you go, well, the last time I was rewarded for obeying it, so it would make sense for me to obey it again. And that increases your faith in God's laws and God's standard of love as you do that, right? So you get rewarded through all of these different things, and faith is one of those rewards in a way. Feeling that your desire intensifies for your future life. Because without your desire for your future life increasing in terms of how you're going to live your future life, you're basically going to live the same life you've already lived. And you don't, if we look at the life the majority of us have on earth, it is very unfulfilling for the most part, right? Full of addiction, full of maybe the pursuit of pleasure, but even that becomes quite unfulfilling because it's not in harmony with the law. And so there will be penalties associated with it. So this is what happens when you obey the law. Now, we want to explore, see, last week we explored more issues of like this side of the equation of what happens when you break the law, which we will do more this week as well. But we didn't focus on areas of where you're breaking the law, the principles behind the law so much. What we tried to do was introduce this principle alone. And this principle is, at some point, every single person who ever wants a relationship with God has to come to terms with the fact that in their heart they need to have a love of the Lord. In their heart. It has to be a feeling in your heart to love the Lord. And if you have a feeling in your heart that you love the law, you will be far less inclined to sin, which is breaking the law. You'll be far less inclined to do it. Because you have a feeling that it's good to obey the law, you then want to obey the law in every area of your life. But if there's no feeling in you to obey the law, then you can see an area of your life comes up and you'll make a different, you'll make not the choice to live in harmony with the standard of love that God has, not live in harmony with the law. You'll just make a choice of, is it going to bring me seeming pleasure right now? Oh yes, so I do it. Or is it going to bring me seeming pain right now? Oh yes, I'm not going to do it. So an example of that is when the law is demanding of us, the law that we need to obey to live in harmony with it, we're going to have to be humble, right? And part of humility is feeling all of your emotions. In other words, owning them for yourself and being responsible for them. If some of those emotions are painful, a person who doesn't obey the law is just going to go, well, they're painful, I'm not going to feel them. They're going to go, like, because it's pain, I should be able to avoid it. Not understanding that choice is breaking the law. Right? And also with regard to truth, we often go, oh, in this moment I've got to tell the truth, but I don't feel like telling the truth, it's going to get me in trouble. Let's say I did something wrong and somebody's asking who did it, and I go, oh, not me. Because I might get in trouble. We're breaking the law straight away. Right? Most of us in those circumstances go, well, I'm going to get in trouble, and that's going to be worse than breaking the law. But trust me, it's not, because most of you have yet to see the results of breaking the law fully. When you pass, many of you for the first time will get to see the results of breaking the law. And trust me, it's not a pleasant thing to go through if you haven't been conscious of that on earth. Right? So here we are in this area where we're obeying the law. When we obey the law, we don't have to be sorry for anything we do, because we obeyed the law and it was always right. So we don't have to be repentant for anything we do, because we've obeyed the law. That's one of the advantages of obeying the law, is that you won't do anything wrong. And if you don't do anything wrong, there's nothing to be sorry for. Right? So you won't have feelings of guilt or regret if you obey the law. None of those feelings will be there because you've obeyed the law. And those feelings are actually impossible to have if you obey the law. On the other hand, we've got the disobedience, you could say, the disobedience of the law. I disobey. So, in other words, I'm now in disharmony with the law. I'm also in disharmony with God's standard of love, given the fact that God's laws are God's imposition of his standard of love. So I'm also now in disharmony with God's laws and disharmony with love. Right? The net results are going to be the opposite of many of these things. I'm going to attract evil into my life, and also eventually even have evil emotions in my own soul as a result of disobeying the Lord. That'll be one of the penalties. With regard to truth, I would like to live in a state of lies. And many of you here at this stage don't understand the level of truth you're going to need. Many of you have been educated by the world you live in that facade is not a lie. Do you know what I mean by that? In other words, faking something, faking a feeling is not a lie. But we notice it everywhere we go. In England, it's really interesting. We're at the shopping centre, and you know, somebody comes up and passes you and just sort of goes around you, and it's all polite, like, oh, sorry, no worries, please, thank you. But the feeling inside of them, like if you're in Austria, there's no polite, please, thank you. It's just like, get out of my way. So less facade, you could say, in that regard. But in England, it's like polite, everyone's polite, it's really good, mate. You know, you come up to an area in England, there's all these narrow roads, isn't there, wherever you go, and everyone's parking on the side, so you've got to stop and wait for everybody to go past. And why they don't design the roads a little wide, I don't know. And so you've got to start there, right? And you know, somebody's coming through. He's coming through.
Yeah.
You got to stay. And then at the end he goes, thank you. Well, for you. You forced your way through there, right? And this is the kind of thing we're used to doing in polite society. We're used to basically presenting a lie. Right? And many of us don't consider that to be a sin. In fact, we consider it to be polite.
To be a loving act.
To be a loving act, right? But actually, from God's laws, that's living an untruth. Right?
When you talk about evil, where would you draw the line for that? Because I think evil's a word that a lot of people feel very much.
Where does God draw the line of evil?
So it's just if you're breaking the law, you're saying that's evil.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
The motivation for breaking the law is evil. Yeah, that's pretty tough, but that's how it is with God.
Because I personally feel not that sensitive about using the word evil. Like I describe things as evil, and people are like, "Whoa, that's only reserved for your Hitlers of the world or whatever."
That's right. That's a general philosophy of the world, isn't it? It's like there's normal.
Right.
Yeah, and as we described last week, normal, from what all of us consider as normal. Remember, I've drawn for many of you the spheres before, right? So you've got all the different spheres in terms of conditions of love from 1, 2, 3, right up at the moment to the 36 has been created. But the earth lives here in the lower of the first sphere. That's where the earth is. So
Pretty evil, right?
Pretty evil. You know, and yet for the majority of us, we think that's normal, not evil. So what God defines as evil, we're defining as normal. And so when we use the word evil, most people are thinking, oh, it's right down like the darkest of hells, you know, like the Hitlers and the Stalins of the world, you know, they're the evil ones, right? And they're not considering God's definition, God's standard of love when it comes to the use of the term. From God's perspective, every time you choose to break a law that you know of, you're evil.
All right, thanks.
Yeah. Behind? Straight behind.
Yesterday, me and my wife, we woke up at 4 in the morning or something, and then we fly to England, and then we take the car and had a lot of issues with driving on the left side and such.
Yeah.
So, and at evening at 10 o'clock we go in bed and we want to sleep. And she say, "Oh, I didn't clean my tooth." And I say, "Of course, I neither or me, but we are so tired, you know." And then I say to her, "Look, you know what A.G. said about the laws and obeying the laws. I am not humble enough to recognize and to obey to this law of God who made these laws that is healthy for our teeth to be clean.
Yeah.
So we have to be humble to stay up and going and cleaning the tooth, you know? So what I'm wanting to ask you is the following. For such laws which are empirically very like to be observed, it's not so complicated. It's complicated sometimes when we are lazy. But there are laws which I don't know about, which I don't can observe, and that's where the issues began to be here.
True. And what we're going to talk about over the next 2 days is we're going to talk about the principles that are behind the law. So that's one of the things we want to talk about. And we raised sort of these truths in 2016 when we did a series of assistance groups in 2016, and one of them was called God's Loving Laws. And in there, we introduced a lot of principles behind laws. So we want to talk a bit about that today and tomorrow. The other thing we'd like to talk about is the priority of laws. So when I say evil, the breaking of laws that are done on purpose, there are, so you could say there's a hierarchy of importance of the laws you may break. So an example of that is like if you break a physical law, such as gravity, then there's no evil attached to breaking the physical law except if you did it on purpose. In other words, you went up to a high building and you jumped off. That's you breaking the law of gravity on purpose. The purpose obviously is to kill your body, obviously wanting to get away from the world, but that purpose is evil. It wasn't the actual physical breaking of the law of gravity that was evil, it was the purpose behind breaking it that was evil.
Can we relate that to the teeth?
So it's the same relationship really when it comes to teeth or any small thing like drinking coffee or tea or, if the purpose of these things is to, example, drinking a drink like coffee or tea, if the purpose of it is to get you away from your own emotion, in other words, to calm you down, to G you up, to help you avoid a feeling of depression, help you avoid a feeling of fear, because coffee is often used for that, then your purpose is evil. So under those circumstances, you shouldn't do it. But if you're just drinking coffee and you can smell and you like the taste and you're not hooked on the caffeine, in terms of needing that G up, then so maybe you have decaf or whatever and you just like the smell and there's no other purpose to it than you just enjoy it. Well, now the purpose is not evil. Right? So a lot is going to depend upon the motivation. So example with cleaning the teeth. If your purpose is based on fear or your purpose is based on cleanliness, well, obviously one purpose is evil and the other one is good. So again, it depends on the motivation of the heart of the individual.
Could we not also say that, like, if you don't clean your teeth are not going to go well, especially with our modern diet. So we're going to get rotten teeth. But if we consistently don't clean our teeth because we lack love for ourselves or we're angry about having to take responsibility, there's an additional emotional and spiritual law that we're breaking, and so there will be additional problems.
So there's now evil attached to that physical action rather than just the physical action itself.
That's right. It's the same with the coffee. If I'm drinking the coffee because I feel entitled and I don't care about the people who suffered to bring me the coffee and
the environment that suffered,
then obviously there's an additional sin. Whereas if someone presented me with coffee from their coffee beans that they'd grown in their yard
in their backyard,
I wasn't drinking it to get high or to get avoid or what have you, just the physical act of drinking will have physical effects on my body that are not going to be that good, but there won't be the additional spiritual sin attached to it. Yeah.
So this is something we want to talk about more when we flesh out this problem, with regard to truth versus, with regard to law, obeying law versus disobeying the law.
And also, Jay, you're going to talk about, aren't you, the principles involved which help us discern these laws that we think, I don't have any idea. If we understand certain principles, then we can ascertain what the law would be, even if we haven't had a single instruction about, there's a law pertaining to A, B, C, and D. We'll know, well, if I follow a loving principle in this situation, I can't break the law because the law is always in harmony with love, truth, and humility.
And up the back there. Of course, in this conversation, what I'm trying to do is just catch you up with what we talked about last week.
So I'm just trying to sort of challenge one of my fears.
Yeah.
So a couple of times I have felt as though it might be me that makes it into a one before everyone else.
Yeah.
And I appreciate some of those times I was under the influence of drugs and or alcohol. And
highly unlikely that's going to be the case under the influence of those things, right?
Anyway, I just want to ask whether you think it's going to be you or one of the other 14 that makes it into that condition.
Why are you even worried about that, River? Like, what would, and also what would drive you to ask that question in this discussion? Like, it's a strange, very strange question to ask in that regard, because firstly, there's a strong feeling of competition in you, isn't there? Yeah. Which is what motivates the question. So my suggestion is deal with that, because you're not going to get anywhere closer to God when you have a feeling of superiority competition with others. Like, God treats all of us as equals, and our desire is going to determine whether we become at one with God or not, nothing else. So at the end of the day, whoever has the strongest desire will be the person who becomes at one with God, is the answer to your question. But it's interesting that your question is motivated by quite evil emotions, actually, right? Because of competition and desire for superiority over others, a desire to not feel equal to others, to feel like we're better than others, wanting to feel better than others. And these are all quite evil emotions that drive a lot of badness on the planet. If you think about even the wars that are going on right now, you see one person decides, one leader decides, we're going to go to war with another country because of wanting some superiority over that country in some way or another, wanting to take from that country in some way or another. So this emotion drives even these kind of very severe results that we see on the planet. And that's an example of how something we think is innocent actually is quite evil in its underlying motivation and causes many, many disastrous and problematic things occurring on the earth as a result. So these kind of emotions are not helpful to your relationship with God. They're also an indication that there's a desire to break the law as well. You follow?
To some degree, yes.
Yeah.
I get you.
No worries. Okay, so let me continue the conversation. Of course, as a part of this, there's going to be things like penalties in our life. There's a penalty for breaking the law. Penalties are things like, if you break a law, you will get a result that you don't like down the track at some point. Does that make sense? A result that you don't like. So down the track, you will get a result of, like if you break God's laws, one of those results, but let's say if you break God's law regarding, let's just, the use of paper, easy one to relate to. Then the penalty will be down the track. There will be a number of penalties. Firstly, so we're talking about the use of wood in just day-to-day life. One, if you break the law with regard to the use of it, there will be penalties associated with breaking of the law. So some of those penalties include destruction of the environment. Right? Some of the penalties include the fact that in your own soul, if you don't have a feeling of economy, then some of the penalties associated with that include you're going to end up wasting things, and God's laws don't like waste. Right? So maybe just as an aside, I'll raise the issue of the use of paper, just as an example. So let's start with toilet paper, shall we? What isn't starting with toilet paper? What's going on now? How's this related to God's law, right? Okay, so what's the loving use? Is toilet paper loving in any way? What's your opinion? You get to wipe your bottom and get to smell a bit cleaner as a result. So for most people, they go, well, that's a loving purpose. Paper, what does it take to make paper? It's quite hard, isn't it? You've got wood, you've got to turn the wood, you've got to grind the wood into pulp, and then you've got to mix it with a lot of water and through a process of draining away the colour of the wood to get it to be a natural colour, and it uses lots and lots of water as a result. And you're also using lots and lots of wood, of course. Now, toilet paper is the use of paper one time, isn't it? So in other words, all of this stuff has happened to the paper and you're just using it once. Now, a more loving use of paper would be to create a page, put some text on it, and then save that page for hundreds of years. The beauty of that use of paper is that every person who ever uses that paper is reusing it over and over again. And the purpose is for their education, which is a wonderful purpose, because the more you can educate people, the better things become on earth generally. That is a general truth. So toilet paper is the use of one time. It gets flushed down into the toilet, and frequently in most modern countries it goes through a system into a sewage farm, and it doesn't actually benefit the environment or anything in the way it's passing through, and you end up with it in effluent systems that are basically just now like huge amounts of toxicity of waste in those effluent systems generally, and they've got to protect them, and unfortunately in most countries a lot of it gets flushed out to sea as well, and so you end up with it all polluting the environment. So it's used once, and then all those other things happen. So in your home, on the normal day-to-day life, from God's law's perspective, you should not be using toilet paper. Interesting thought, then. Because you're breaking so many laws of love by doing it. So there's the law of economy. Love is one of the laws of love is economy. So it's not economical.
I'm just laughing, Jay, because like people thought it was bad when you came for the chocolate, you came for the toilet paper. I'm feeling like they're like,
last time I came for the mouth, this time I come for the backside. Yeah, but there are principles involved. There's alternatives, isn't there, if you think about it. In most countries, there is running water, and in most Western countries there's running water, and in places like England you've got a lot of it, right? It seems to be raining here a lot, even in summer, right? In Australia it's a bit harder, of course, with water. We have to catch our own water in Australia when we live outside of a city, and we have to have our tanks, and we're actually building right now some tanks at home to capture some water. So water is very precious, but in other places of the world, like in Europe and North America, often there's lots of water in many of these places, so plenty of water. And you're having it on tap anyway, and it's right there in your bathroom for most cases. All you really need is a device, which is a handheld today, and you don't have to, and all you would need is a set of cotton towels, which are all reusable, which you can reuse thousands of times just by washing them. If you wash your bottom properly, they'll be pretty clean anyway, right? And then all you have to do is wash them once a week or whatever. And now you've got a system that's a lot more friendly to the environment, a lot more friendly to the law. Like it's in more harmony with the law, because you're making things that are lasting a long time and not just being used one time. Does that make sense to you? The principle is quite clear. So actually using toilet paper in your homes, which is different than if you're on travel or something like that, because if you're travelling, sometimes you're going to a place where you don't have control of the environment and you might need to use the paper there. But if you did it in your homes, and every person in the West did that in their home, you imagine how much the consumption of wood would go down. Because if you look at the way we're using paper nowadays, we hardly use paper for books anymore compared to these kind of daily practices where we're using paper every day for some things, right? And toilet paper is one of those things we're using every day. So it's actually unloving to continue to use toilet paper if we look at it honestly. Now that's just a physical thing. But by engaging a physical thing, we're actually being unloving to the environment. And also, many of you don't realise, you're also being unloving to yourself because paper on your backside hurts more than water on your backside. Right? Yep. You try it. It hurts more. Right? So you're actually being unloving to yourself as well, being unloving to the environment, and also not considering the long-term ramifications. If 10 billion, 15 billion people on the planet all use paper every single day, maybe once or twice a day of their entire life, you imagine the damage that's going to do to the environment. It's going to be incredible damage to the environment. Just that. There'll have to be whole plantations of Pinus radiata, one type of plant, in order to satisfy the human demand for toilet paper. And obviously that's not loving. Right? So it's clearly not loving. And yet how many of us go, I want that thing. Now, compare that to the use of paper in a book. Now we can see the book can be used many times. If it's well made, it can last hundreds of years. Right? It can be read by hundreds of people in its lifetime, sometimes thousands and sometimes tens of thousands of people can read that book in its lifetime. Now the paper being used in the book is being used over and over and over and over again. This toilet paper can't even be recycled, but this paper can, because it's still in a fairly pristine position even hundreds of years' time. So we need to talk about recycling as well, because there's unloving things in recycling as well. But this book could be recycled after being used hundreds or perhaps thousands of times. So it's a much more loving use of paper than this is. And yet this is something that most Westerners do or use every day, right? And we do it without thought, without consideration to the environment. Just like I raised a few weeks ago with the Belgians about their chocolate, and I raised in Austria about their cups of coffee, and so forth. It's like we don't consider the ramifications of our choices and decisions. And the main reason why we don't is because we're not sensitive, emotionally sensitive to God's laws. That's why we don't. We don't even think of it, right? And that's because we're not sensitive to God's laws. Now, the penalty of using paper one time is there's going to be lots of pollution as a result of it with the processes. There's going to be a lot of problems in the environment as a result of it. And if we don't manage it differently, then we're going to end up with creating so much requirement for it in the world that we destroy other species just to satisfy that one unloving demand. And it's not the best way to clean your bottom on top of all of that, which is interesting in itself. Like, it's not even logical to do it, because other things are more logical. So that's an example of how one of our choices that we don't even think about in the course of the day creates evil on the planet. And it does create evil on the planet. We come across to here and now back to Karen. Leave your hand up, Karen. So.
Hi AJ, I just have a question on how do you address these unloving choices? So, as in, do you do you change the actions and then feel where the emotion comes up, or do you reflect on what's the driving motivation of these actions, and then your action changes?
Very good question, isn't it? Like, how do I change that? Well, so let's look at toilet paper. How do I change that? Like, so let's say I feel, AJ, this Jesus character is pretty extreme, isn't it? So, you won't even let me wipe my mum with toilet paper. So we're thinking the law is fairly extreme initially, is what we think. And we think that breaking the law of love in this regard, why not? We don't see any reasoning behind why not to break it. So the first point really you could say is educating ourselves. We need to be willing to educate ourselves about what love is. Right? So that's something Mary and I are trying to do around the world, trying to help everyone understand what love is. So the very first thing is you need to be educated about what love is. Now, how do you receive that education? Well, we talked about that a lot last week, about conscience, about God being able to deliver the truth to you via the conscience about a particular thing that you're doing. So that truth gets delivered. So the very first thing you need to do is determine what is truth. Can you see that? Without the determining what is truth, you could take actions which are actually more harmful, right? So in other words, let's say we decide we're not going to do toilet paper, but we're going to do some other thing, I don't know what, but some other thing that would be more harmful to the environment than that, using soap or something instead. I don't know how that would work.
Bottled water to wash my bum.
Sorry?
I'll just buy.
I'll buy bottled water to wash my, like drinking water to wash my body, that kind of thing. So obviously also unloving. So if we don't know what the truth is from God's standard, not from our own, then of course we're very apt to then make a bad choice or a bad decision. So firstly, that's that. So once I have established what truth is, and there are very easy ways to establish it. Number one, the conscience, which is the connection we have with God, and God can share what the truth is. Secondly, we can measure everything with the measurement of love applied to it. So in this regard, with toilet paper, you can see if I just look at it without God involved, so God can say, toilet paper, and God will tell you actually toilet paper is unloving, if you're willing to hear God say that, but most people aren't, of course. And so, but if we look, even if we use our minds to determine what the truth is, we know it's not economical to go through a huge process to produce paper only to use it one time.
So just using logic.
So just use much.
So is he just using logic?
Well, it has to be logic based on love.
Right.
Because a lot of people think they're being logical when they're unloving, and that's not logic. So it has to be based on love. So what you need to be able to do is measure whether there's love in it, and that's what determines what's logical, right? So that can be done. It's just even intellectually, can't it? And then the question becomes, okay, I've determined the truth. The truth is I shouldn't do that. Right? So that's the truth. Obviously, from that there becomes two other problems. There's what is the solution then that is more loving? There's that question. But there's also the question of how do I stop the desire to do this thing? There's also that question. Now, you can change your behaviour, and you can do it by just making a choice. You can. There are many, many billions of people historically that have done that in the spirit world, and they've progressed to the 6th sphere of the spirit world by doing that, by making a choice and controlling their behaviour so they no longer make that bad decision. Instead they make a choice for the good decision. And they control themselves every time they feel like making the bad decision. They control themselves and make themselves make the good decision until such a time as they've not remembered any more of the emotion that drives the bad decision. So they might have to, for many of them, they do that for years and years and years until they don't remember. And there are some things, obviously, like using toilet paper, you won't remember once you change your decision here and you take some action, you won't remember it in 30 days probably. You'll be thanking your bottom will be thanking you. Of course, you should also thank your bottom, but your bottom will be thanking you, you know. But also the environment will be thanking you. You'll also feel better in yourself as a result. You'll also feel cleaner, ironically. So you'll feel a lot of good positive benefits from that within a few days. And so you wonder why in the hell you ever use toilet paper all your life. You will. You'll get to that point. But it obviously requires, firstly, that you make a decision and change some behaviour. But that still hasn't changed the underlying motivation to why you didn't even think that was wrong in the first place. Like, how was it that I was so desensitised to the process of making paper and its results to the environment, that when I was using the paper every single day, maybe more than once a day, I'm using the paper this way, how is it that my heart didn't say there's something wrong with this, right? Because if my heart had said there was something wrong with it, I wouldn't have been able to do it that long. I would have done it maybe once or twice. But you see, what's happened is that we were introduced to a lot of these practices as children, and nobody educated us to determine something based upon love, right? They didn't help us go, what is the loving thing to do? All they did said, this is what we do, and this is what we should do, and it's clean and it's good, and everybody goes, yeah, that's good, and this is what we do, and everybody does it, and you go and finish up. As an adult, you go and buy toilet paper every week or fortnight or month or however often you buy. Now they have these huge packs of it, don't they? That sort of last for 2 or 3 months. But you're not looking at where did this come from? Like what causes me to be so insensitive in my life that I don't even understand where something comes from and where it goes after I've used it. There's got to be a problem in here for me to do that in my heart.
It's like a sense of responsibility, like I only care about myself and irresponsible for the rest. Well,
that's partially true, isn't it? Because there is that sense of I should only care. From God's perspective, you should care for yourself. So that's not in itself a bad thing that you care for yourself. What's the bad thing is that you're not caring for the environment while you're caring for yourself. In other words, you're throwing something back into the environment or taking something out of the environment, which is damaging the environment and damaging, like there's a lot of things getting damaged by just this one thing in the world. And just like there's a lot of things being damaged by, coffee plantations and tea plantations and cocoa plantations and, all around the world there's this very strong consumer-oriented thing where the consumer is just thinking of themselves, but they don't have the heart to feel like, well, what's driving me to not even think of the environment? And what's driving me to not even think of the people who are doing this work for me? And what's driving me to not even consider these things? Which you can see is very much about issues of love of people, isn't it? Very much. And the environment, the love of our planet. If we don't love our planet, it's going to respond badly, and it is. And eventually most of us will find that even getting water to drink is going to be difficult if we're not careful the way we're going. And so this is a big problem that we face on the planet, and it all comes from the lack of emotional sensitivity in our heart to not be sensitive to these, what seemingly are small things, right? But actually they demonstrate a condition of the heart that hasn't considered. And therefore it's a big thing. Yeah. It demonstrates a spiritual condition in our heart. Firstly, the spiritual condition partly is that I'm not even willing to find out what God's laws are and obey them. So that there's a spiritual problem there that I'm not willing to find out. That's a bigger problem than not knowing the truth in small areas, because it's a not wanting to know the truth in terms of what's in my heart and not wanting to know the truth of what what I need to do to change my heart. So you can see as part of your question that yes, I can change my actions, I can change my decisions, and I can do those almost instantly, right? But to change your heart, which is the real thing that needs to be changed for you to no longer be driven in these directions, that is a lot more difficult. But that is what God requires, us to change our heart in the end. Make sense?
Yeah, it does. I think it also then becomes, it feels uncomfortable after knowing it all.
After feeling it in your heart in particular, you become very uncomfortable. So Mary and I are very uncomfortable when we travel because we have to use toilet paper to clean our backsides when we don't want to. So I don't actually use much toilet paper when we travel because I take, normally the only place we can get water is at an airport is in a plastic bottle. So what we will do is we'll buy a plastic bottle and then for the rest of the trip I use that to wash my bottom. I fill up with water and that's how I clean myself every day. Does that make sense? Yeah. So it's like a portable bidet, right, that I've created. Obviously, if everybody on the planet had made the decision to just do the appropriate thing in every building, which is really what needs to be done, then none of you would need to buy toilet paper ever again, right? And we would also have an industry where people are making small, like wipes that are able to be washed for you, and there would also be that industry. There'll be an increase in there's net benefits with big manufactured processes. Big companies have to do them. With small manufacturing processes like making cloth and whatever, big companies don't have to do them. Small companies can do them. So you get the net benefit. There's a net benefit to the world in lots of different ways when you make a change in what you choose to do. And like plastic, big companies have to do them, have to create it. Yeah, it's the same sort of principle too. What's all this us wrapping our vegetables when we go to the supermarket now? Notice we find it so hard when we're travelling because we eat mostly fruit, vegetables, and nuts, and everywhere we go, they're wrapped in plastic. We don't get that. You can't even hardly find loose stuff anymore. But in most shopping centres and everything, are all just wrapped in plastic. Since COVID, it's even worse, isn't it? Everything wrapped in plastic. Now it's all one-use plastic too. It's all like you tear off the package. Now you can't use it for anything else. It's like you can't use it to store something, or it's different to buying, say, a plastic bottle where you might be these ones have travelled with us into Portugal. We can't even do that. Sorry? Germany, sorry. And so that's like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 weeks ago. And they're still with us. But with this stuff we're tearing off the packages, there's nothing we can do but put it in the rubbish. And then people say that, you've got recycling, that's our saviour. No way, none is that the saviour. It takes more energy to recycle something than it does to produce it from scratch, oftentimes. And that's not the case with all products, but when it comes to plastic, it certainly is, because you've got to wash it, you've got to get all of its impurities out of it, and then you've got to put it through a process again. If you examine the process, and the fact that most of us don't even know what the process is a demonstration of our lack of sensitivity to what we're doing, right? And there's all this stuff getting produced, and it's all going somewhere in landfills, right, all around the world. It's actually now in your water supply. When we go to different places when it rains, I always put a stainless steel bowl outside to catch the water, and then Mary and I look at it and drink it, see what it's like, right? We did that in Belgium, and it was full of black plastic, and sometimes the plastic was up to 5 millimetres long, and this was straight from the rain, right? In the water, in the rain. It was in the rain. It's been blown up in the atmosphere, formulated drops around it, and then fell again as rain in Brussels. It was. And we're going, Even the rainwater now has to be filtered before you can drink it. Like, how bad is that really? And this is in not far from here, really, is it? It's just across the way, really, isn't it? Belgium, next country over, and yet there we are, where we can't even catch the rain anymore to get water to drink without filtering it out using some process. That's how bad it's getting, and yet every day we go to the supermarket and we're forced, if we want to buy food, we're forced to get basic with it. Every single day. Who decided this? Well, the people who were trying to get rid of waste based on oil decided it, obviously. And that's because you could make biodegradable systems that are also quite sealing and do a similar job. But of course, there's not a lot of motivation to do that because love isn't our motivation. Obeying the law isn't the motivation of it. But convenience is the motivation. So, in answer to your question, yes, you can change your action. Yes, you can make different decisions. Yes, you can change your behaviour. All of those things you can choose to do immediately. But you're going to have to, at some stage, change your heart. And that's going to take a bigger job than just making a different decision.
It's kind of like your question isn't an either or, it's a yes and. You both have to do both. You have to change the action and deal with the feeling. And some people deal with feelings and then a lot of their actions change, and sometimes people change their action, but if you're humble, you'll feel the feeling associated with it.
Yeah. So in my life, I didn't always use it a day. I didn't ever. I built sort of like 15 houses in my life. Right? It was only the last 3 of them that I had the days. So that tells you that I didn't even think of it before then. Does that make sense? I didn't even contemplate the net result of using paper before then. And now everything we do has it. Everything that gets built has it. Every God's Way day has it. In the future, you'll come to Australia maybe one day, or hopefully we'll have God's Way centres all around the world at some point, and you'll come there and you won't have toilet paper.
And I'm guessing it's not a passive thing where I say, okay, I've dealt with the emotion and then...
No. You become passionate about... See, when your heart changes, you become passionate in the direction of love. It's not just a passive, oh, well, you become passionate in that direction. And this way, Mary and I, before we travelled this time, we had to sit down and just think, wow, there's a lot of things we're going to have to do which we feel, to share truth. There's a lot of things that we would prefer not to do to get here, into travel with regard to things like toilet and with regard to things like the way we know food is presented in most places around the world. There's a lot of things we're going to have to do that we wouldn't normally do. And we have to consider, is the benefit to those things greater than the damage we're doing? And what can we do to mitigate the damage? So in Portugal, for example, we stayed in somebody's house and they shared a backyard. And we asked her if we could dig up the backyard to get rid of most of our waste, which is what we did. So the only waste we were left with was a bit of plastic, and the rest of it was all natural waste. And we dug up different places of her yard and turned it into a garden and put all the waste in it. Within a few months, that will all be gone, and the soil will be better. And that's what we did. But when we're living in the middle of the city, like nobody's got yards here, and it's not even a back planter or that nobody's even designing places in these cities where you can actually go and put your waste, or nobody's designing places in the cities where you can be responsible for your own waste, and nobody's designing even in the back. You could, even in a high-rise building, you could make a little area, couldn't you? If you weren't so focused on money and profit, you could make a little area on every platform level that is actually a garden. And everybody learns how to recycle, put most of their vegetable waste and everything in that garden and improve the soil, and you can have all sorts of plants. You could even have food growing in every building that way. But because developers want to leverage money, nobody's thinking about that. there's lots of loving solutions, but unless my heart is motivated in a loving direction, I will not consider the loving solution. Yeah. So up the back with Karen, we will.
People outside who are waiting to come in.
Come in, there's plenty of chairs if you want to come.
I feel very strongly about waste. I think I always have done, but there's also shame attached to my, like I will be secretive about not wasting things. And so I'm just thinking.
Can you speak a bit louder for me, Karen, because I'm not hearing you well?
Yeah. So Karen was saying you feel quite passionately about this, and you have for a long time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think I'm also a bit secretive about it. Like I feel uncomfortable when others. I feel judged by others. I also judge other people for wasting too.
Yeah. Can I just stop you now? You know when you say, I feel I know these things and I love them, but on the other hand, I feel like, you know, people make me feel ashamed when I share what I believe, right? What you're really doing is saying, and this is a breaking of one of God's laws, you're saying your feelings matter. Your feelings of shame matter, is what you're saying. Your feelings of being made fun of or ridiculed matter. And God doesn't agree. He doesn't care whether you're made fun of or ridiculed with regard to the law. He's going, you either break it or you live in harmony with it. And if you decide to not live in harmony with it because you're worried about what other people think, which is a big problem you've faced in your life, right? If you choose to live out of harmony with the law because you're worried about what other people think, then you're sacrificing God's law for the sake of your feelings. You understand that?
Yes.
Karen? Now, why would I choose to do such a thing? Can you see? So let's look at this problem, which many people have, right? Put both on this side. Let's drew sort of pros and cons. So any one of God's laws are positive, aren't they? All of God's laws are positive because they're all in harmony with love. All right? But many people say to us, yes, I know all of that. I know that the laws in harmony with love. I know it's right to do God's law. I know it's right to change my behaviour. I know it's right to share it, to share what I know about these things. And it is actually true that it's a law that demands your sharing. Really, if you hold on to something that you know is truth and you don't share it, then there's a penalty to that because you've broken the law of love. But so even sharing it is a pro. It's a loving thing to share what you know to be true. Right? So these are all good. But then the average person goes, but I have some feelings. And let's say the feeling is whenever I talk to somebody, and many of you have experienced that when you try to share the divine truth with somebody, right? They go, you're listening to a character who says to Jesus. For a start, that's pretty stupid. And then they go, and look at what he's saying. It's going to destroy the world if you follow what he's saying. So if you stop, for instance, using toilet paper, that's going to destroy the world, right? I don't think so, but they apply that to other things, right? As I say, about emotion in particular. And they go, that's going to be terrible. It's better that the world doesn't deal with their emotion because everybody will be calm then, and everybody will be stoic then, and everybody, but I don't see a very calm world, do you? But anyway, this is the kind of things they might say. So they start to ridicule, make fun. They start to get What else? They start to even attack you. Sometimes even revert to violence. Like Mary and I received death threats and everything, like for doing what we do. So even to the point of like death threats and everything, like you might finish up getting.
Break up contact with you. Don't speak with you.
Well, that's true, but can you use a mic because nobody heard what you said. So what we said there is people break contact with you. They don't want to speak with you, things like that. That's true. But please use the mic to speak. Anyway, so here we are. We're getting all of these things happening, and we see them all as cons. We see them all as drawbacks to obeying the Lord. And for most of us, what we do is we measure these, the cons, the disadvantages we think of, we measure that and we go, the value of that is let's put it as a number. The value of that's worth 1,000 in the negative, if those things happen to me, let's say. And then we get on this side and we value that to be 50 in the positive. Right, so internally we've got this value system. The value system is if my emotions are involved where I'm getting harmed in any way where I have to feel an emotion and be humble, the negative value of that is huge, is what we're saying. That the actual value of it internally in the way that I'm thinking is huge. And then on the other side we're going, look at the pros. These are all things that sound nice, right? They all sound nice, but I only value them at very low value. So now internally I've got a problem. The problem is I am valuing these things and placing a higher value on avoiding them than I am valuing these things and placing a higher value on doing them. Right? So in other words, God's laws, harmony with love, sharing, I'm putting a low value on these things. And then on this side, the ridicule, made fun of, condescension, attack, the breakdown of relationships and all these friendships and all these other things that might happen for me doing the right thing, I put a high value on them. So if you think about it, what I'm really doing is I'm saying my selfish desires are more important than God's laws. It's really what we're doing inside of ourselves, right? Now, if I am doing that inside of myself, can you see what's going to happen? Is where my energy is going to go. My energy is going to go towards the thing I value the most. And if the thing I value the most is avoiding condescension, ridicule, attack, loss of relationships and all those things, if that's what I value the most, then of course I'm going to do what that value demands, which is not share, not follow the law, not do the right thing. That's what I'm going to end up doing, right? If I have this at a higher value, so let's say that's 1,000 minus 1,000, but this was like plus, which is really what it's worth, plus infinity, right? That's its real worth, right? Then can you see now it's a no-brainer. All I do is do it, and if I get those things, well, so be it. I won't worry or care even that I'm getting those things anymore. If I disconnect from them emotionally, I definitely won't care about them anymore. Because inside of me emotionally, the principle is everything inside of me emotionally that I value, if it's in harmony with God's principles and laws, it's going to drive my behaviour, and I won't worry about it. I won't be concerned about it. And these other things like ridicule, being made fun of, condescension, attack, I won't concern myself. I'll know they're happening. And they don't feel pleasant. But I'm not saying to myself, my avoidance of emotion is more important to me than my obeying God's law. In other words, if you want to boil it down to a very simple statement, my humility is worth obeying God's law, is really what we're saying. In other words, This is just stuff I need to feel. Just feel it. They're just feelings. As I've been saying to some groups, they're ant emotions. Somebody ridicules you and you feel bad. So what? It's just an ant emotion. You can feel it, it'll go away. It's temporary, it goes away. Somebody makes fun of you. So what? Just feel it. It's an ant emotion. If you let yourself feel it and don't act upon it, let yourself feel it, it'll go away. Condescension, somebody's condescending. It feels unpleasant, I know. It's not nice. But it's just an ant emotion, you can feel it and it'll go away. Even somebody physically is killing you. Like, so what? The law is infinite. The law is of greater value than your earth life. Actually. Because let's say the value of your earth life is a million or more in this scale, but this is infinite. It's going to benefit not only this life, but everyone that you come after this. So even if you lose your earth life for following the law, so what? That's the attitude emotionally that we end up needing to have, you see.
Because the benefits far outweigh.
The benefits far outweigh even the loss of your earth life. So, when somebody says, Karen, I feel these things, but, really what we're saying is, but my emotions are more, saving my bad emotions are more important to me, is really what we're saying. And that is where we have a flaw. It's a moral flaw to say that to ourselves. That's what we need to change. Make sense? Yeah.
May I also highlight a couple of other things in Karen's question?
Sure.
If we flip the board. So Karen, you said, I feel like I get this part of God's laws, but I just try and do it in secret. So I avoid those emotions that Jesus was talking about. But every time you try to do something in secret, you're immediately in disharmony with the truth, because transparency is a part of the truth. So you're really saying, I obey the law, but I don't tell the truth doing it, which means that you're already breaking the law. And also, because I know and love you, I also know that where you think you're obeying God's laws in this regard, there's actually quite a bit of sin in you about it. Because there's a feeling of lack, fear, terror, judgment and superiority. So you think, I never waste anything and it makes me righteous and sort of superior. And also you have a terrible inherited fear about sort of waste, lack and sin and shame, actually shame about wastage that you're going to need to correct in order to really obey the law.
So the moment a lot of the obeying of the law is based on fear. And if you think about your history as a Christian, what's one of the things they say you should do with God? Fear God.
Yeah.
Right? And that's what we see a lot of people doing. When we start to introduce God's standards of love, instead of everyone going, you've really got God's standard of love now, I can start understanding God's standard of love. God's law is great, They go, I'm afraid of God. What's he going to do? I'm afraid of penalties. Right? I'm afraid of them. And as a result of fear, it often drives my actions to do what I consider to be the right thing. But the fact that fear is driving it, fear is not in harmony with love. Fear is the creation of evil. Because it's fear driving it, it's not going to be in harmony with the Lord.
Yeah. And we could say, if we have a feeling of superiority about obeying God's laws, we're actually in I'm on the wrong side, we're actually in disharmony, aren't we? Because superiority is actually sort of a spiritual sin where I'm feeling better than others by obeying the law. And equally, if I'm breaking the principle of truth, I'm not really obeying the law.
Now, I haven't finished introducing this subject, so I would like to continue if I can before further questions are asked, because I want to continue just introducing the subject, then we can talk more about some more questions. There's additional problems with disobeying God's laws. One of the additional problems is that you're going to need correction at some point. The person who obeys the laws never needs to be corrected. The person who disobeys the laws is going to need correction. Right? In addition, a person who obeys the laws doesn't need to repair anything that they did in the past because they didn't do anything wrong. But a person who disobeys the law is going to need to involve themselves in repairing or repairing the damage of their sin. So now you can see drawback of this one is I'm going to have to do reparation. When I do this, there is no reparation. So in other words, when I obey, I will no longer have to be corrected. And when I obey, I will no longer have to repair the damage of my sins because I won't commit any. There's nothing to repair. Right? In addition to that, depending on which way I'm progressing, I'll also need to repent. In other words, go through the process of emotionally feeling sorry for the things that I've done. Right? So I have to repent. Now, I won't have to repent for anything when I obey because there's nothing to repent for. Right? So straight away, you can start to see that not only is there the penalty of disobeying the law itself, but there's also the penalty which is a part of I now need correction, I now need reparation, I now need to have repentance for what I did. And these are all additions that are not required here, in this column, in the obedience column. Right? So I'm obeying, I don't need to repent. I'm obeying, I don't need to repair anything. I'm obeying, I don't need to correct anything. I'm obeying, there is no penalty. Right? So for most of us, what we're doing, and this is something we pointed out, remember last group, for those of you who were there, what we're doing is we look at this equation, but it's not in our heart yet. Because remember I had a conversation with Perry last week, remember Perry, that conversation where you asked about a specific sexual sin sort of thing. And I said that that's not the problem really. The problem is that this is not in your heart yet. This whole idea that God's standard of love is upheld by God's laws. And if I obey the law, I will get these results. And if I disobey the law, I will get these results. And if that's in my heart, then I want to obey the law with every law. Not just sexual laws, not just physical laws, not just emotional laws, not just spiritual laws, but every law. I would want to obey them. I'd want to find out what the law says, and I'd want to do it. If this is in my heart, but if it's not in my heart, all I'm going to do is go, I've got some problems because my life has brought me these problems. So in other words, I've got penalties from past sin that my life now is bringing me. All I want to do is solve them so I don't have those penalties anymore. So an example of that with a man with relationships is I keep on having relationship after relationship, but I never have a one relationship. It's like the final relationship where I feel like I can, live with the girl for the rest of my life and, that kind of relationship. I never had that. And that's a part because of the penalty of breaking the laws regarding sexual, moral and spiritual behaviour. That's happening. But what we do is we go, I've got that problem and I just want to solve that problem. I just want to have a relationship. I'm lonely now. That's part of the penalty. I'm lonely now. I feel sad that I'm by myself. I'm, yourself very in your 40s right now and, haven't really got on with life very much because of that. And so there's part of the penalty. And so you're going, oh, there it is. There's the penalty. And the majority of us, when we're like that, we start getting sensitive to the penalty, not understanding that this is all ahead of us yet with regarding to the problem. But also we get sensitive regarding the penalty and all we want to do is selfishly stop the penalty. In other words, our motivation for change, instead of it being the principle of upholding God's standard of love in every area of my life, I make it about me. I just want to feel better. I want to stop getting the penalty. I just want to feel better. So, in other words, we make a selfish pursuit of solving a problem And in the process of that, we're being selfish, which is also breaking the law. Again, there's another problem. Still breaking the law, not harmony because it's selfishness. And obeying the law isn't selfishness. Right? So it's very important first, before we continue this discussion, that all of you get some feeling in your heart about, like, this is more important than my problems. Understanding this is more important than understanding the rest of my problems. Because all my problems come from not understanding this. So you could say this is like big picture solution to all my problems versus do I go through my individual problems one by one trying to sort my life out. This, if I have this in my heart, I will naturally go through all of my problems easily and sort them out. I will. If this principle of obedience versus disobedience to the law, if I get it and grasp it in my feelings, then it will have some benefit to me. But if I just go, I just want to solve an individual issue of my own, and I don't have this in my heart, this principle in my heart about the big picture, the laws themselves, then you can see I might solve one or two of my own problems, but I'm not going to, on the whole, become a much more loving person. Right? Because the motivation is still selfish. Does that make sense to everyone? Yeah? It's very important to get that in your heart because, you know, a lot of times when we teach principles, Mary and I spend a lot of time with people trying to teach principles. And a lot of times we notice that everyone wants to revert back to their little problem all the time. Not understanding if you've got the principle, you wouldn't have the little problem in the first place. You would see every issue as an issue of either obedience or disobedience to the laws of love. And you would want to eradicate any emotion inside of you that causes you want to disobey, and you want to become the person whose heart is motivated to obey. Knowing that it's going to cause because a lot of the other rewards here are, I haven't listed yet, right? And they include things like joy, happiness, happy, and so forth. Bliss, in fact, is only possible on this column. Living in a life of bliss is only possible in this column.
Harmony.
In the harmony column.
Yeah. But harmony amongst people on earth is only
There'll be
possible.
peace in your life, not constant turmoil. Here, there's going to be turmoil, internally and externally, right? No peace internally or externally. There's going to be a lot of unhappiness. There's going to be a lot of fear. There's going to be a lot of anger. There's going to be a lot of dread. You know? When you list the advantages and then compare with the disadvantages of disobedience, the advantages of obedience are so great, right? But the majority of us don't give it enough consideration about the principle because we're so focused on our little problem that we forget the principle that's going to govern and help us with that problem. Does that make sense to everyone? It's very important that you grasp that. This principle will solve all your problems if you get it in your heart. All your problems. Not just some of your problems. Not just one of your problems. Okay, so we go across to Tim on this side, and we go across at the doorway. So on that side, if you just put your hand up there. Good, Tim.
Okay, thanks, Jesus. So would something to do then be to experiment with using the conscience, recognizing a moment where I desire to break the law and then challenging that in the moment
Yeah, and it's similar to the question asked here, wasn't it? That it's just an extension of that. Yes, firstly you need to determine what truth is. Now, of course, the fastest way to do that is via the conscience. But of course, unfortunately, most of humans are not sensitive to the conscience. Because if we were, none of us would be using toilet paper, for example, if we were sensitive to the conscience, right? So if we were sensitive to the conscience, you can see that truth would be able to be shared with me if I'm sensitive to my conscience. Truth would be able to be shared with me all the time, wouldn't it? Like anything I could ask, I would get an answer. And God is desirous of giving you answers. So God's not this mystical creature going, Tim, I don't like you very much. I don't really care about you very much. So I'm going to make you sweat. I'm going to make you guess. I'm going to make you work it out. I'm going to make you, go through. And unless you have some sort of magical, mystical experience with some kind of, substance like, drug, should we call them? But really, a lot of people now call them what? Plant medicines or whatever. Yeah, and no such thing from God's perspective, really, in the sense that if you're using them for purposes such as that, then obviously I don't. But what happens is that we, in that state, we need to realise that we're going to be in a position where we can determine what truth is as long as my conscience remains open. If my conscience fails, then I need to revert to other methods, some of which we've already mentioned. Making some logical choices based around what we believe love would do, for example, is one of those methods. Or looking what attractions bring us and guessing it from there. Of course, the conscience is the most reliable form, right? So it would make sense that I stay open to the conscience, because then I can ask any question and get an answer from God on any subject. And then God can share with me the truth. So, even with tiny little things, God's able then to share the truth with me. And then I go, in that moment, as you properly said, in that moment I can make a decision, can't I? Even though I've not dealt with the emotion. So in other words, an example of that. You know some truth. One of your friends doesn't. He's asking some questions about his life. You know you can help him if he just understood some basic truths. So, but you're afraid of what he'll think of you by sharing those truths. Right? Now, that's a circumstance that many of you face, actually, where you worry about your friends and you worry about what they think of you and so forth, and that causes you to not share the truth. But if you could feel the loving motivation which would say, share the truth. God's truth would be, share the truth. You've got an opportunity. Like the way I see sharing truth is, you give me an opportunity to share it, I'm damn well sharing it. That's how it feels to me. And that's how it would feel to you after a while. You're going to share it because you're given an opportunity to share it, so you share it. Now, in that moment, let's say you're very afraid of what the results are going to be. He might completely disown you, right? Let's say. Particularly after he asks you where you got it from. He might completely disown you. But let's say that's a fear, isn't it, inside of yourself, right? That you'll lose a friend if you share this truth. Even if that fear exists, if I obey the law, if I believe the law is more important than my emotions, right, I will share the truth. And then something might happen. Now, what happens after that will very much depend upon the emotions you already have. So if you're scared that he will condemn you for the rest of life, then he may do that, because that's the emotion you already have in you that needs to be released. The law of attraction will work perfectly, and he'll condemn you for the rest of your life. You lose a friend, and then you'll have to go through that feeling. But that feeling's just an ant feeling. You'll have lots of friends in the rest of your life. After you've lived a few thousand years, how many friends do you think you're going to have? Not like 5, is it? It's going to be thousands, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, millions potentially, and not just a few. So the feeling that you have is just a small temporary feeling. And if you treat it as such, you will be emotionally be able to feel it and work your way through it and release it. But if you treat it like your feeling is a mountain that's unbearable and will be unbearable for the rest of your existence, you're basically treating your feelings as mountains and God's laws as molehills. So it's sort of like, if we want to look at it from a pictorial perspective, you start treating your feelings, your sad, your bad feelings, shall we call them, you start treating them as if they are like this big, right? And then you start treating God's laws as if they're this big.
Yeah.
Now, if that's what's going on inside of me, can you see? I'm not going to obey the law. I'm going to save my feeling. Can you see that?
Yeah.
So even if I have the spiritual belief, and this is a spiritual belief, by the way, it's an example of a spiritual belief. If I have the spiritual belief that my feelings are more important than God's laws, then I will always sacrifice God's laws for the sake of my feelings. Every single time. But if I have the opposite feeling, that God's laws are this side of the equation, so this is now the law, and this is my feelings in comparison to the law, this bit here is my feeling. Can you see? The law, obeying it, is going to be my first priority. And in the process, if I've got to feel feelings, I'll just feel them. Because I'm humble. I'll feel them. Do you follow?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Can I ask one question on the conscience?
Can I just follow up
sure.
on that? Because you mentioned about the faith building.
Yeah.
So every time you, even like you were suggesting, intellectually choose, okay, I'm not going to engage that addiction with women, or I'm not going to, whatever. There will be a reward, and that can help your faith. But obviously, logically, the bigger reward will come when you release the emotion that drives the impetus towards the breaking of the law.
Because it's the emotion that the law measures as a higher priority than
the action.
The action. But there will be some reward when you don't take the action. But
so you can pay attention to it.
Yeah, pay attention to the reward, because often what happens is people change their action, but then obviously the emotion, the anti-emotion gets triggered, where we think, oh my gosh, it's a molehill.
Or a mountain.
Sorry.
I don't think you think, oh my gosh, it's a molehill.
I was learning more. I think you're being punished.
It's bigger than everything.
Yeah.
And then we don't notice the reward. Because we get all self-involved in trying to manage the emotion, which is why Jay's pointing out, the importance of the humility in the process. So, but it's great to do experiments with this kind of thing, because you go, that I did actually feel better, or I completely missed that because I was just like angry, or
Just on the conscience then, because my understanding, which might be wrong here, is that in some areas I feel like my conscience is stronger, maybe the environmental and plastic stuff, but then with the women's stuff I don't feel like it's as connected and I can't see it as clearly. Or is it blanket everywhere, or is there certain areas that your conscience has more strength you can feel from?
The answer to your question, Tim, is an interesting...
Or is it a choice that I'm not wanting to?
Well, no, there's an interesting thing, is that you get to the stage where you value God's opinion over your own on everything. So at the moment, you only value God's opinion when it's in harmony with yours.
Yeah.
You follow me?
Yeah.
And this is the trouble that most of us have, is that we generally only value someone else's opinion when they agree with us. You follow? Now, of course, God is going to agree with you on some things. So, an example is, how you feel about the environment. Well, God agrees with you on some of those things that you have. Yeah. Of course, he disagrees with you on others, because I don't there's not a lot of things you are positively doing to fix
Sure.
the environment, so
Absolutely,
he disagrees with that.
Yeah.
But he does agree with some of your opinions about the environment. But when it comes to the activation of your conscience, you're able to hear that because it's already in agreement with what you believe. The biggest issues you face are not those issues.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah? The biggest issues you face is all the things that all of God's truth, right, that Tim does not agree with.
Yeah. A lot of things.
And I write Tim's truth in red because it's actually mostly error that he thinks is true. Now, when God's truth is in agreement with Tim's truth, the conscience works. When God's truth is in disagreement with Tim's truth, the conscience doesn't work at all. It's like it doesn't even exist.
That very thing, yeah.
So the conscience is not working properly. You follow me?
Mm-hmm.
Because what should be happening with the conscience, if it's actually working, is there's God's truth. And Tim knows nothing.
That'll take some humility, yeah.
Let's get into perspective.
Yeah.
What does God know?
Everything.
Everything. Infinite everything. What do you know? Well, even when you know a few thousand things, from God's perspective, it's like, you still don't know much at all. You follow me? So let's get it in perspective. So the way I see it for myself is, Jesus knows nothing. You follow me? And I have ideas, I have thoughts, I have feelings, I have concepts, I have imaginings, I have there's some obviously past experiences that I've had as well, but I have a mind that I can use. I have emotions that I can be sensitive to things. There's a lot of things that God has gifted me that allows me to live my life. But in terms of knowledge, which by the way, the earth is so, everyone on earth thinks they know pretty much everything.
Yeah.
And everybody knows something different. Oh, so obviously there's a problem there. But we all generally believe we know a lot. And usually the older we get, the more we think we know, right? Which is what I've noticed to be very much an untruth. But what I do know is this, and this is one thing Jesus does know. Whatever I think I know, compared to God's truth, it's nothing. That's what I know.
Yeah.
Now, if I know that, and I really feel that in my heart, can you see, when God tries to share a truth with me via the conscience, I am going to be an open receptacle.
Yeah.
I'm going to be completely open to hearing anything God wishes to share. You follow?
Yeah.
But when I arrogantly believe that my truth matters, that what I think I know matters, it automatically stops me from being able to be an open receptacle to God's truth. Automatically. Because I've got fixed points of view on different things. So when I have a point of view, as Mary will tell you, it's easily changed. Most of you don't know that about me, right? Because you think I'm pretty opinionated most of the time. That's because there's a whole heap of things God's shared with me that are God's truth and it's His truth. So I have to be straight about it, right? But when it comes to my ideas, I'll give them up instantly if God shows me that I'm wrong. You follow me?
Yeah.
Yeah. Now, obviously, I'm not doing that perfectly yet in this life, but that's what I did in the first century. That's how I became one with God in the first century. I'm not doing it perfectly yet in this life, so I'm working on that. You know, every day, as Mary knows, my first prayer is not for love. My first prayer is for humility. Yeah? I have experienced in my life that if you're humble, God can share anything with you. The goal for me now is to get rid of AJ's arrogance and go back to Jesus' humility. Right?
Yeah.
Because that's how I learned everything I've already learned. Yeah. In that space, you recognise, so this is a space where you switch into humility. And in that space, you become an open receptacle to all of God's truths. And of course, that won't happen until you're at one with God. You'll be perfectly humble then. Up until then, you're working towards that goal. Now, there is a switch that occurs though, and that switch is that you value your own truth not at all. So you might not be fully open to all of God's truth yet, but you need to get to a stage internally where you go, everything I know might be wrong. And you're okay emotionally with that. Where you have a feeling inside of yourself that you can bear that. To bear the thought that everything you might think you know is actually an error. Right? When you get to that stage, you're able to receive truth from God easily. So the issue that most people face is that God's truth is not equal to their personal, what they call their personal truth, what they believe to be truth, which actually for the most part is error. Right? And the big issue that we face is that when those two things are not equal, we cannot hear our conscience. And that's why most people don't hear the conscience. Make sense?
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah. Should I? Jim?
I want to ask, when you're not very strong in knowing God's laws and truth,
I'm not hearing clearly again. Can you just go up closer with your mic?
Yep.
And speak a bit more loudly for me.
Okay. When you are not very strong in recognizing God's truth yet and God's laws, how do you recognize which one part is a correction and penalty, and which one part is just other people don't want them, to go along, not to go along, but basically they just want to stay where they are and just like trying to pull you back.
Yeah. So in other words, a lot of you face this problem, don't you? That when you try to or attempt to obey the law, that people around you don't like you trying to obey the law, and then they dump on you about that. They cause your life problems in some way or another.
They usually are happy with some parts and not happy with other parts, and I'm confused because some things
change.
Some things, I might be wrong too, because I cannot recognize what law yet or what truth fully, or even half or even a little bit. So which one parts it might become correction from that part too?
Well, your question is interesting because I sort of feel like you're putting, in some ways, the cart before the horse, right? This is the horse, if you like. This is the thing that should lead you. This equation should lead you internally. So when we start to worry about, I'm having a disagreement now with a family member or a friend, or they are saying that I'm wrong and I think they're wrong, and when I start to worrying about, what do I need to do to correct things if I did something wrong, and what I did actually wrong? I don't really know, and we go into all of these kind of things. It all substantially results from from one or two basic problems. The first basic problem is my conscience isn't working. right? So what I would do, before I try to work out what I need to correct and what I need to repair and what I need to repent for, I need to get my conscience working so that I know what I need to repent for and correct. I need to focus my attention on getting that openness towards receiving truth from God. That's what I need to work on. That's what I need to focus my energy on. When you try to focus your energy on a relationship with a person, fixing a relationship with a person, or fixing something or a problem in your life, without first knowing whether those problems are actually real or not real from God's perspective, then you can easily make mistakes. Does that make sense to you?
It does make sense, but usually it's like internal doubt. I can tell to the people, what I think without a problem, but after it comes, because if it comes with the same things from different sources, cannot it be that I am wrong, but not to
that's true.
majority around me?
But you say that makes sense, but let me just deal with that first, right? This statement. Let me deal with that statement first. Whenever anybody says that, it means that it did make sense. And it's not making sense to your heart. You think it's making sense in your head, but it's not making sense in your heart. What I said was, you must first focus on the biggest problems you face. Your problems with a person are not the biggest problems you face. The biggest problems you face are the problems you have with God, not with the person. Does everyone get that? The biggest problems you have are spiritual. Does that make sense?
I usually, sometimes I feel God, and sometimes He talks to me, but very often I feel like there's something in between. When I talk to God, someone else is answering for me.
Yes, we don't need to go into the details at this stage about your specific relationship. What we need to do is get the principle. The principle is this. My relationship with God are the number one problems I need to face in my life. Very important to understand that principle. See, what I notice is that many people say they want a relationship with God and say, it's not happening. And then they go, because that's not happening, I then need somebody else to help me with other problems in my life because God's not helping me. And what I'm saying is, no, the very first problem we need to solve is the issues we have with God. Now, there will be emotional issues you have with God. There will be spiritual issues you have with God. There's even sexual issues you have with God, as well as physical issues you have with God. And they all need to be resolved. The next things we need to resolve after that are resolving the issues we have with God's laws. They are the next thing we need to resolve. Right? So the issues we have with God are to do with the flow of truth and love from God. They are what we need to solve first. The next issues we have are how we live in or out of harmony with the law. So we want to become obedient. We want to obey the law. That's the next issues we have with God. When you start raising your personal issues, you are neglecting these two issues. So if we look at personal issues, these include relationships with my friends, my family, my relationship with the environment, my relationship with my children, the things that happen to me in my life, the things that I attract, the things that cause and effect, the things that I do and then the effects of the things that I do. These are all things that are less important, but most of us don't think they're less important. When we ask questions, in fact, for the most part, we're thinking they're more important than these two things. So what I want to say first is this. These things here are far more important than any of your personal problems. The reason why they're more important is that these things will solve all of your personal problems. So they are more important. When you focus only on your personal problems first, without solving these issues, you've already got the priority wrong. As soon as you get the priority wrong, what happens is, after the priority is wrong, now your focus becomes on what is your priority. Remember we said before when we drew the two hills, molehill and the mountain, and we said this is our problems, our issues, our emotions, our feelings, right? When it's that big and the law is this big, what's happening is the problem is now that I'm now focused on what's less than these things, priority-wise. And as soon as I do that, I'm also not going to solve this problem, whatever the emotional problem is. And what I noticed everybody doing on Earth in particular is that, there's many times Mary and I are talking to, we talk to tens of thousands of people in the course of any 1 year generally. And in that process, we find that the majority of people focus on these things, their personal feelings about everything, rather than focusing on the bigger issues which will solve these personal feelings about everything. And the substance of your question is already doing that. You're already asking for a personal solution. Fundamentally, you're saying that my conscience isn't working, so what I want is another alternative. I want you give me more information about some other thing I can do, which sort of bypasses the use of my conscience. Does that make sense to you? That's really what's being asked. And I'm going, why would you want to bypass the use of your conscience? That's the most important thing to deal with. So rather than worrying about the personal feelings, right? Focus firstly on the relationship with God, relationship with God's laws internally. Then you will sort out your personal feelings easy enough after that process has been completed. Now you're getting a bit hassled, aren't you, from the Spirit with your daughter? No. Your sister?
No, my client.
Your client, all right. The Spirit's with her are hassling you, yeah?
The minute she walked through the door.
Yeah, that's right. So we'll just ask our friends to take all those away for a moment and just stop that from happening. Thanks, guys. Just to leave her with her own feelings, so that's better. Okay, so what we need to do is focus our attention firstly on focusing on the principles that we need to gather first and develop first. Then when it comes to our personal problems, look at the resolution of those problems. Or you could say it another way. If the conscience isn't working properly under all circumstances, then the thing you need to focus your attention on is getting it working. Not on bypassing it and using some other technique to find out truth. That's what needs to be focused on. Does that make sense to you?
It does, about emotions. There is a lot of videos on your channel about how to deal with emotions.
There is?
Basically none about if you have a difficulty to deal with good emotions like joy, happiness, love. If that's the biggest thing to feel for you, how do you deal with that?
Well, again, I would still say these are the more important issues than that. You follow me? So firstly, I'd be looking at, how do I feel about God? Am I happy with it? How do I feel about what God feels about me? Right? So am I sensitive enough, am I open enough to feel what God feels about me? Because that's how you receive love, right, isn't it? It's to feel what God feels about you. You follow? That's a more important thing to do than any of the other things you're wanting to do. So that includes dealing with your emotions. As I've said, even though we've talked many, like we've done probably hundreds of hours of presentations about emotions, mostly because, for the most part, because everyone asks about them. Whenever I try to talk about principles, they always take me and try to talk about their emotions. And I'm going, but I want to talk about the principles. And you're going, I want to talk about my emotions. And I'm going, but I want to talk about the principles. And you're going, I want to talk about the emotions. And they go, okay, well, I'm not obviously going to get to talk about the principles because all you guys want to do is talk about your emotions, right? So that's why those presentations happen, right? But now I feel a bit more firm about it. I go, but I don't want to talk about your emotions. If you want to talk about your emotions, go home. I want to talk about the principles that will govern the rest of your life, including all of your emotions, that will help you with all of your emotions. I don't want to teach you how to feel every emotion. I want to teach you how to, like, how the soul works and everything, so that you have some confidence and faith that you can handle any emotion. And to be honest with you, human emotions are, there's probably 1,000 or so that you can describe in the English language as an emotion, and all of them are anti-emotions. All of them are really not very important in comparison to what is important, right? Now, what is important is that your life leads you towards a state of happiness and bliss. That's what's important. That's the important thing. And what I'm trying to teach you is how that happens. And if we talk about your emotions all the time, what we're doing is we're focusing way too much attention on just feelings you've got to, at some point, learn to feel. Now, there is a reason why people want to focus on their emotions all the time, and that is because everyone has a terror about how they feel. The human race is terrified of feelings. In 2016, we did a series of groups with people, and in amongst there, we called it the global terror of emotion. And the reason why many of you want to talk to me and to other people about your feelings all the time, rather than just have them, is because you're terrified of actually just having them. So you want to talk about them instead. And so what I find is that almost everywhere we go, isn't it, Dave? Everybody wants to go, but I want to talk about my feelings. I want to talk about my feelings. And I'm going, honestly, I've dealt with a lot of my feelings. I don't want to hear yours as well. Does that make sense? I've had enough of my own to deal with, and after a while, you probably feel the same. You've had enough of your own to deal with. You don't need to talk about them. You just need to have them. Right? The problem is when we need to talk about them, we are not having them. In fact, we're afraid of having them. That's why we're talking about them. And I want to get away from that. What I want to do is focus on attention on the important things, so that you eventually face that you are basically fundamentally terrified of most of your emotions, and you come to face that as a reality, and then you go through this terror so that you have a feeling of confidence at the other end that you can deal with anything. That's what I would prefer.
Even if you're terrified of joy, happiness, love.
It's the same.
It's the same process.
It's the same process.
Yeah.
Most people are terrified of emotion, and to be honest, a lot of the emotions they're terrified are good. Like, there's so many people on the planet that are terrified of love. Real love. They're terrified of it. You know? Because a lot of people are terrified of truth. That tells me they're also terrified of love. Because love and truth work in harmony with each other. So most people on earth are even terrified of love. They're afraid of opening their heart to somebody, and they're afraid that other people will take advantage of them. They're terrified that when you are in a loving state, that people will treat you badly, that you'll be a walkover, that that other people will think, like we notice this a lot when I'm travelling, particularly with myself. A lot of people, particularly men, think I'm a bit of an idiot, and they think that I can be easily manipulated, right? As a result of that, they don't know me very well, of course. When you're in harmony with love, you're not easily manipulated, but most people don't know that, right? So unless we deal with the terror we have of just feeling anything, which is a big problem on earth, is terror of feeling anything, we're not going to be able to feel every emotion. If you deal with the terror of what you feel about feeling anything, then you'll be able to feel everything. Then nobody will need to teach you how to feel emotion. Nobody will need to teach you, nobody will need to discuss it. You won't need to discuss any emotion, even with your closest partner. You might discuss it just out of interest, but you won't need to, because you'll be having it. You won't need to discuss it. When you have your feelings, in fact, when you actually feel your feelings, right, and you have them, then what happens is that you're going through a personal experience, and that experience is going to lead you in a direction towards love. If there are negative emotions, you let them go. That experience will let things go. And in the process of letting things go, you'll be clear of those things. And if you can do that with every feeling you have that is negative, in the end you won't end up with any negative feelings. And also, by the way, we need to learn to do that with every positive feelings, because feelings are meant to just pass through us, and we have them. They're not meant to be stored. Right? They're not meant to be retained. The memory of them is meant to be retained, in the sense that I remember that I felt that way, in terms of intellectually remember. But the memory emotionally is not meant to be retained, because we're meant to have new experiences. Like God is trying to lead you to a place of a new experience every single time, not an old experience regurgitated. Right? And so, unless we deal with that, we won't change. So, what I'm saying to you is, with regard to this conscience, the emotion is, but I'm frustrated with my conscience. It doesn't work all the time. Sometimes I don't know whether I'm getting some answers from God or not. Like, how do I know? I know it's not. Sometimes it feels clear, and other times it doesn't feel clear. So that is an emotion that you're terrified of having. So you want some reassurance. And I don't want to give you the reassurance. I want you to feel the emotion. Does that make sense? Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay.
I'm just looking at the time.
Well,
So it's 25 past 1.
Past 1?
Yeah.
Okay. And well, I think we better stop for some lunch or something, shouldn't we? And do you want to do that? Yeah. Time goes fast because I'm having fun. I don't know if you are, but I am. Shall we come back at 2 o'clock? And then give us a half an hour or so to have some lunch.